This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video March 27th.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Atheists, agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Northern Kentucky University political scientist Michael Baranowski. I'm joined today by Professor of Law at Chase Law School, Ken Katkin.
Hey, it's great to be back, Michael.
Yeah, I am looking forward to talking with you about some of the things we didn't have the time to get to on our regular weekend show, starting with something I actually mentioned to Jay last week. I think it was last week when we were on together. President Trump's executive order rescinding security clearances and restricting access to government buildings and employees for attorneys from Perkins Coie. It's a law firm that worked with Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. They're the ones that hired that opposition research firm, Fusion GPS, which led to the Steele dossier on Russian collusion with the Trump campaign. And when I was talking about this with Jay, I just sort of dropped it in there. We didn't get a chance to talk about it, but I'm glad we can today, because this isn't the first time that President Trump has punished a law firm that's opposed him. In late February of this year, he revoked security clearances for attorneys at Covington and Burling. It's a firm that worked with special counsel Jack Smith in Smith's investigation of Trump. Now, Perkins Coie sued. They're arguing that the executive order isn't actually an executive order because its purpose is actually judicial in nature. And they go on to argue that the order punishes all of their firm's over 1,200 attorneys for alleged misconduct that involves only a handful of them, that it provides no opportunity for Perkins Coie to contest what they believe to be false and disparaging claims, that it's retaliatory, that it's a violation of, separation of powers, the Equal Protection Clause, viewpoint discrimination that violates the First Amendment. I might have missed one or two things because, according to Perkins Coie, there's a whole lot of unconstitutional stuff going on here. And this week, U.S. District Judge Beryl Howell, an Obama appointee, issued a temporary restraining order against the parts of Trump's executive order that effectively bar government contact with Perkins Coie, as well as not allowing their attorneys to enter government buildings. In the TRO, Judge Howell wrote, "The chilling effect of this executive order threatens to undermine our entire legal system and the ability of all individuals to access justice in the American judicial system." Howell also said that to the extent that this executive order appears to be an instance of President Trump using taxpayer dollars in government resource to pursue what is a wholly personal vendetta, advancing such political payback is not something which the government has a cognizable interest. And it's been reported that Perkins Coie actually had some trouble initially to try to find another firm to represent them in their lawsuit, because a lot of folks in the D.C. legal community are just less than eager, understandably, to get on the bad side of an administration that seems pretty eager to pursue these sort of personal vendettas. Now, states, on the other hand, they've been less reluctant to push back. 21 state attorneys general filed an amicus brief supporting Perkins Coie in this action. Now, Ken, I'm fairly certain I'd be really disappointed if you didn't have major problems with all this. Yeah. But I'm particularly interested, I think, in your view on the legality of what President Trump is doing here. What do you think?
Yeah, of course, I think it's not legal. And I should mention, he did it again yesterday. I don't even know if you knew, but the third law firm, Paul Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison, just late in the day yesterday, he also rescinded all their security clearances. Yeah. So after Covington, Burling, and then Perkins Coie, the third one is Paul Weiss. So he's not being chilled by Judge Howell's ruling against continuing to do this. And of course, these are all Democratic firms. These are all firms that he himself has crossed paths with one way or another. And that's obviously the basis for it. And that, not only undermines due process and the First Amendment, as you mentioned, but also the Sixth Amendment right to assistance of counsel, because people are not going to be able to necessarily get lawyers. And I think that's part of what you just mentioned, that Perkins Coie themselves had difficulty getting a lawyer. So their Sixth Amendment right to the assistance of counsel is being undermined here, as is many of their clients. And I think the whole purpose of this is to send the message out to people who might engage in political activity that's, in opposition to the administration. Well, we're going to come after you and harass you and arrest you and take whatever legal penalties we want against you. And you're not even going to be able to get a lawyer to defend yourself, because the lawyers are going to know that we're going to come after them if they defend you. So, I think Judge Howell rightly said the whole thing sends a little chills down her spine. And it's hard to imagine a more direct assault on the rule of law, other than maybe the Khalil case that we talked about in the main show today. Just simply disappearing people might even be a more direct attack on the rule of law. But second to that, trying to come after political opponents by first coming after their lawyers, so that then they can't get lawyers when they're when it's time to come after them. That seems like a pretty direct authoritarian move, really, that you could associate with the worst kind of authoritarian countries, and it's completely inimical to our American tradition of the rule of law.
Yeah. And I think what particularly concerns me about this is that until the midterm elections, and assuming they turn out the way you and I hope they will, the courts are basically the only avenue that we have to kind of pursue challenges to some of these highly questionable, to say the least, activities of the Trump administration. And pretty clearly, they're trying to go after that one remaining lever that we have.
Yeah, and he's also trying to, you mentioned that the state's attorneys general still, it's a little harder to chill them than to chill the private firms, but so much of what Trump is doing, he could try to characterize under the national security umbrella, that he could also take away security clearances from state attorneys general and people like that too, if he could get away with this. So even that kind of last kind of that thin blue line of the state governments, even that would be vulnerable if lawyers can find it harder and harder to practice. We also, with Perkins Coie in particular, I don't know if you mentioned this, but that firm, you mentioned their role in the bringing the Steele dossier to light. If you remember, associated with that, there was the whole Durham investigation during the first Trump administration. And actually, the one and only person that Durham ever was able to get a grand jury to indict was a lawyer named Michael Sussman, who was a Perkins Coie lawyer that had a role in bringing forward the Trump dossier or the Steele dossier. And in the indictment, Sussman was charged with lying to the FBI about the circumstances by which he came to have this Steele dossier. And, a unanimous jury acquitted him. So, whatever factual predicate there might be for this, it seems very undermined by the fact that this firm was in fact investigated by a Trump-appointed special prosecutor for many years, well into the Biden administration. Biden did not cut off that prosecution. He was really trying to indict Mark Elias, but never was able to get a grand jury to indict him. And ended up, the one indictment that he brought against one Perkins Coie lawyer led to an acquittal. So that backdrop makes it really, really obvious there's no legitimate factual predicate for this. If there had been any legitimate factual predicate, it would have come out a long time ago during the Durham investigation, which I think went on for 5 or 6 years.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Hey, Fidelity. What's it cost to invest with the Fidelity app?
Start with as little as $1 with no account fees or trade commissions on U.S. stocks and ETFs.
That's music to my ears.
I can only talk.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Zero account fees apply to retail brokerage accounts only. Sell order assessment fee not included. A limited number of ETFs are subject to a transaction-based service fee of $100. See full list at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
I guess what also concerns me about this is I believe Judge Howell at one point said something to the effect of, this is about the access to buildings and officials, not about the revocation of security clearances, because that's essentially almost entirely within the president's purview, and I'm not going to get involved in that. And so it seems to me that if the Trump administration had just stopped at the revocation of security clearances, then Judge might have been okay with that. And that really concerns me, because that can be a potent weapon to a lot of these DC law firms that do a lot of work that involves access to this sort of information. And so that's a pretty significant chilling effect. And I don't know that there's any answer to that necessarily. I don't know. What do you think?
You're saying about the access to buildings, or about
about the access to buildings? I think that was clear overreach, but the revocation of security clearances, I find it hard to believe that a court is going to go against the president when it comes to that sort of national security thing. I don't know. What do you think?
It depends on, when and how it happens. And, I think if in general, I would agree with what you said, but there's situations where, like with the Jack Smith. So Jack Smith's being investigated right now, and he needs lawyers because he's a target of a criminal investigation. And so if he already has lawyers that are trying to help him, defend himself, and then the security clearances are revoked on those lawyers, seemingly only for the reason of interfering with their ability to defend Smith, I think, most Democratic judges would say that's a violation of Smith's Sixth Amendment right to counsel, because he's entitled to get lawyers. And if the government's going to retaliate against him, every time he gets one by punishing those lawyers, then that's a constitutional violation. I think the best precedent on that actually is not. It may not, you might not say it's on point because it's not directly in the national security context, but there's a case called the Velasquez case that came down in the 90s when the Congress had passed a big welfare reform act. You remember Clinton said this is the end of big government as we know it, and signed it into law. And so one of the provisions in the big welfare reform act said that, typically for a lot of poor people in both civil and criminal cases are represented either by public defenders or by legal aid societies. And a lot of the money for that comes from governments. And so the Welfare Reform Act said, to the extent that the government is funding legal services for poor, nobody receiving those funds and working for those clients can be involved in any challenges to the constitutionality of the Welfare Reform Act. So the idea would be that some people are going to get thrown off welfare, and if those people want to challenge that, and the only lawyer they can afford is a legal aid lawyer, well, the legal aid lawyer is now barred by statute from being involved in that challenge. And the court did find that violated the Sixth Amendment right to counsel, as well as the First Amendment, and actually as well as the Due Process Clause. And, I get what you're saying about, well, national security, maybe the government would get even more deference than in welfare reform. But I still think anything that makes it, kind of structurally impossible for a party to get legal representation. I'm not saying Republican judges wouldn't go along with it, but I don't think Democratic judges would go along with it.
Yeah. And it seems to me that, though, we're likely to see more of this, I would expect. I mean, you mentioned a case just recently, right? And there's no question that even if there isn't any more of it, the message has been sent to establishment Washington attorneys that you take these cases at your own peril.
Yeah, and that's what I think. I think Judge Howell, who, as you mentioned, is an Obama appointee, I think the way she saw this is pretty mainstream for the way any judge appointed by a Democrat will see this. So I don't think there will be quite the level of deference and again to this administration, because this administration doesn't have credibility with judges. And so I think that is going to affect, what you typically see about the measure of deference that's afforded to by judges to the White House.
I think for most of us on the left, we see this as Trump completely lying about saying that he's going to de-weaponize the DOJ and de-weaponize. Well, this wasn't a DOJ thing, but it kind of wraps into the same sort of thing. But I think the Trump response to that is, listen, these are bad actors who were the ones who politicized justice, and so therefore we want to remove them from the system. At least that's my take, is what the folks on the right are thinking about this for the most part.
But that's nonsensical when you apply it to private law firms, right? I mean, even if you think Michael Sussman, the one person who was ever indicted on any of this stuff, even if you think that the acquittal was wrong and that he was lying to the Justice Department about the pedigree of the Steele dossier, he couldn't control what the Justice Department did with it. How could he have weaponized the Justice Department? He wasn't in the Justice Department.
Yeah, I think maybe more broadly than the Trump administration says, look, this is a law firm that engaged in these sort of shady shenanigans to make these wild claims about how we're colluding with Russia or Russia's colluding with us. And this is the sort of firm that has no business having any access to government secrets, having any access even to government officials. Now that's a bridge too far, but I think the access to government secrets thing, the security clearance, they can make enough of an argument for that to stick. We hope you enjoyed this preview of our supporters exclusive midweek show. If you'd like to hear the rest of the episode, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter. Supporters get ad-free access to all of our shows, membership in our Politics Guys Discord group where you can join in on the conversation, and other benefits at different levels of support. To become a supporter, go to patreon.com/politicsguys. You can also support us through Venmo or @politicsguys or through PayPal. You'll find all of our support links in the show notes as well as at politicsguys.com/support. And if you'd like to get the midweek show, but you're not in a position to become a financial supporter, that's not a problem. Just send me an email at mike@politicsguys.com and I'll be happy to get that set up for you.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,